To all of you American girls, it's sad to imagine a world without you, American girls.
Earlier this year, I released a video covering the first episode of Life is Strange, its strengths, its weaknesses, its budding thematic strands. It was new territory for me since it felt like covering a game based on just its first level, although come to think of it, I did that this year too. Anywho, now that the season has been concluded for a few months, I think it's time we went back and looked at how that all played out. Let's take a look at Life is Strange. This time, the whole Life is Strange. The one thing that the series has focused on throughout its entire 5-episode run has been a sense of emotional truth in the moment. This has its upsides and downsides. On one hand, it's able to totally sell some really touching moments because it contorts everything from its lighting and cinematography to its soundtrack in order to get at the heart of any given scene. Like, my favorite moment in the whole game is the morning after Chloe and Max broke into the Blackwell swimming pool. They wake up in Chloe's bed, she sets up some music, and the two of you just chill in the aftermath of all the chaos you caused last night.
I know that it is freezing, but I think we have to walk. Keep waving at the taxis, they keep turning their lights off.
It's at once serene and nostalgic, a clear attempt to recapture the mornings after the sleepovers of their youth. And you just want them to stay in this perfect moment forever.
Always remember this moment. Photobomb! Photo hog.
And the game teases you by letting you linger there in the morning light of Chloe's room. You have to choose to break the moment and get up out of bed, and you don't want to. But you can't stay forever, you have to get up. Max has to go back to school, and you have to finish the game. It's this great mechanical encapsulation of the game's themes of the folly of trying to capture a moment and stay in it forever, a reminder that nothing, no matter how perfect, is permanent. It's the sort of quiet moment that most games don't take the time to offer, let alone really sell. That interest and emotional truth in the moment also manifests by having Max's powers be awfully conveniently tied to the themes of the current episode. Kate's gonna kill herself if we don't say the right things? Well, that's fine, we should just be able to rewind and uh-oh, our magical time travel juice is all juiced out, or something. Don't get me wrong, it was a wonderfully powerful moment in the game. It had Max stepping up for the first time, unassisted by her powers or by Chloe, and taking her first steps to self-actualization and completing her arc. It had that really pretty frozen rain sequence, and it generated tension for the player in a clever way by taking away a crutch without warning. But this limitation on Max's abilities comes out of nowhere and is never really brought up again, and exists just to sell you on the gravity of Kate's situation. And while it totally works as it happens, it can't help but feel a bit like a parlor trick afterwards. Something similar happens when Chloe gets mad at her dad.
So who do you most want to blame? My fucking dad, of course. Hello?
Max suddenly gains Ashton Kutcher's powers from Butterfly Effect and can travel back in time by looking at old pictures. And those powers just happen to manifest as Max is looking at a photo taken immediately before Chloe's dad was killed, enabling her to change the timeline and save his life in an attempt to make Chloe happy. Again, the resulting scene is worth the awkward rule changes. We get to examine Chloe and her relationship with Max in an alternate timeline, giving us better insight into how Chloe Prime works the way she does, and it gives us nice sympathetic moments with William and Joyce. But it's also a series of contrivances aimed at keeping the emotional threads of the current story alive, even if they don't make the most sense when you think about them. Life is Strange is less interested in solid narrative structure or world building through establishing rules than it is in resonating with you as you play it. An interest in immediate emotional truth also means that the game has a habit of bungling its way into really hot-button issues that it doesn't really commit the time or interest to do justice. Domestic violence, date rape, drugs, sexual harassment, euthanasia, suicidal ideation, drug dealing, and murder all come up as issues that Max has to face, but none of them take up more than half an episode apiece. They serve as melodrama building blocks, but not as issues in their own right. They're monsters of the week that Max has to solve or confront to move on. They're video game puzzles. And that's not bad per se, and a lot of it is done for tone reasons. Twin Peaks remains a major influence on the series, and the idea of an idyllic small town in the mountains hiding a much darker side seems to have inspired a lot of the game. And like the happy bits, the game does try very hard to sell you on them in the moment. Kate's desperation and isolation, or Chloe's desire to end her suffering, or David's abusive nature are all framed to resonate. But in aggregate, their artificial nature as drama generation engines or game-like challenges to be overcome starts to become apparent. Life is Strange oscillates between its main story of Max's character arc rooted in her relationship with Chloe, and the missing girl mystery that reveals Arcadia Bay's darker side. It feels like they knew they needed to send Chloe and Max on adventures in order to facilitate Max's coming-of-age narrative, but they also knew they wanted to keep things comparatively grounded and local. So they shot for a Twin Peaks mystery as a motivating agent for our gal pals to uncover, but without the Lynchian surrealism, they landed closer to a series of Dateline episodes that felt oddly heavy and impactful as we watched them, yet largely consequence-free, save for maybe Kate Marsh's suicide. It's just an odd thing to pair up with a teenage coming-of-age story, like if Holden Caulfield had his internal development while also being a noir detective trying to solve the murder of a hooker with a heart of gold. So if the seedy underbelly of Arcadia Bay is all in service to the coming-of-age plot, how did that pan out? It turns out, okay. Max goes from a timid, unsure blank slate to a confident, bold blank slate. It would have been nice to see her grow a bit more personality in addition to her self-confidence, but she has to act as a cipher for the player, so pretty much all prickly personality traits get sanded off in favor of a more broad character arc.
Gosh, you're so selfless now, Mahatma Max. It's too bad you pissed your power away on high school drama. Chloe does a better job of guilt-tripping me than you do.
It also would have been nice if it were shown rather than told to us a lot of the time. During the game, Max can have a number of undeniably heroic moments the shy girl at the beginning of the game would never have done, or moments of compassion that put her above her peers. But too often her growing stature is simply told to us.
You're not so chicken shit anymore.
Thanks, girlfriend.
You know what I mean. You're becoming like this force of nature.
Of course, you seem more adult now.
I've had my eye on you, and I've noticed that you've been more fearless this week than maybe your whole life.
Damn, Victoria. You're a real woman. Not a little girl like Max. Max is a fucking child.
Oh, Christ, I know.
This feels like it stems from a lot of different points of failure. The wooden facial animations are incapable of showing the subtle difference between saying something timidly or saying something confidently, so the game leans heavily on the writing and voice acting to provide much of its characterization.
I hope everything turns out your way in the end.
Well, thank you, Max. I really appreciate that. Hey, your face looks so intense. Are you okay?
Consequently, Life is Strange is a game that tells you things more than it shows you things, and for a game this minimally interactive and cinematically inclined, that's sort of a bummer. Like, we know despite his rage issues and violence, David really does love Joyce, but we know that because of his computer password and some other found object storytelling techniques.
You make David happy, Joyce.
He wants us all to be happy, Max. He's just not great at showing it.
But what we see in person is a constantly pissed off guy who knows only how to bark military-style commands and hits his daughter.
Don't start, Chloe. Not now.
Yeah, I'm just always starting shit, right? You're a total paranoid, David.
Not now, Chloe.
From snooping around files and computers, we know that Nathan Prescott has a bad family situation and a cold, emotionally abusive father that may help explain his character. But what we see is nothing but a spoiled brat who commits horrendous crimes and violence. We don't get to see David's tenderness or Nathan's need to make his father happy. We're simply told that these emotions exist because we found some baubles that suggested it. And it's not that environmental storytelling is bad at all, but it limits the sort of stories you can tell. Gone Home worked because it was telling stories about the past, stories that came before and have no bearing on your current scenario. Fallout 4 does the same trick when it asks you to examine an abandoned house or whatever. You're basically piecing together an extant story while playing what amounts to, at best, a denouement. But Life is Strange is happening now, not at some point in the past, and telling so much of the story by way of environmental cues and found objects distances us from a lot of that character development. This is why, even after 5 episodes, Victoria still feels the most humanized out of all the antagonists. She is gracious when you're nice to her after the paint situation, and she does appreciate your warning her of Nathan's plans, assuming she believes you. You don't find out about it by reading an email, but instead it happens here, now, in front of you. Granted, it's still in dialogue rather than impacting the plot through action, but it's there, and you experience it as it happens.
Thanks for telling me this, Max. If what you said is true, then you be careful too.
This is also why Max and Chloe's relationship works so well, and why I have fonder memories of Chloe's parents than of Max's parents, who exist and have characterization but don't appear on screen. When the game chooses to show rather than tell, or at least tell in the moment rather than tell via found objects, it's carried by some great performances and writing that, even when it's awkward, is all geared around characterization. We get a real sense of Joyce's exhaustion and love for her daughter in both timelines. We can sense that Chloe was probably closer to her dad, and that explains a lot about the family dynamic. We can see that Frank puts up a tough front, but is really a good guy. We see that Kate is shy, but has a tremendous sense of empathy. The game needed more of that from its main antagonists, who are only given depth when they're off screen. And, frankly, the game needed more of that from Max. In a game so driven by characters, it's odd to me that she feels like she's had her personality dampened. She's an artsy hipster, but not too much so. She's geeky, but not too geeky. She's unsure of herself, but not really that worried about it. The result is that her arc, which drives so much of the game, falls flat. She's too much of a player avatar and not enough of a character in her own right to have that culminating moment resonate. And that culminating moment, that final choice, is the other key issue with Max's whole coming-of-age thing. And look, I've never been a big fan of how these kinds of games handle choice. Very rarely is it meaningful, either thematically or in the sense of giving players agency. Players expect that their choices will dramatically impact the narrative for all time, which will never happen for numerous reasons. And developers tend to give empty options that only offer players superficial choice out of obligation. However, Life is Strange's final choice manages to stumble hard into the opposite direction. It is very tied to the game's themes and is hugely impactful to the resulting narrative. In fact, it's so tied up in Max's arc that it probably just should not have been a choice at all. So at the very end of the game, Max and Chloe meet up at the lighthouse and realize that the storm what ends the world is likely a result of the past week's worth of time-traveling adventures. All of those seem to stem from the time Max saved Chloe from Nathan in the bathroom at the beginning of the series. They also realize that maybe fate kinda wants Chloe to die, given how many times she's died in alternate timelines in the past week. The choice is, then, go back in time and let Chloe die, as is her destiny, in order to save the town, or run away with Chloe and abandon Arcadia Bay to ruin. And it's such a poorly thought out decision. First of all, it boils the final choice down to the which group of people do you save thing, a cliché contrivance that got old years ago in this genre. Worse, running away with Chloe basically means undoing all of Max's character development. All of that you're getting older and you're finding yourself stuff. All the talk of you'll do what is right when the time comes in the finale. Spending 30 minutes helping Max explore and confront her subconscious fears and desires to prep her for that moment of self-actualization. If Max runs away with Chloe, none of that matters. None of it can matter. Not only that, but you're denying Chloe the conclusion to her arc as well. She finally acts selflessly and in defense of a town and a family she's insisted she's hated. She wants you to do this for them, for her, because despite everything, she does give a shit.
I'm so selfish. Not like my mom. Look what she had to give up and live through. And she did. She deserves so much more than to be killed by a storm in a fucking diner. I know I've been selfish, but for once, I think I should accept my fate. Our fate, Chloe.
And it's clear Don't Nod don't want you to pick the run away with Chloe option either. If you let Chloe die, you get an extended cutscene that brings the main players back for one final bow after showing you that everything is finally alright. That Chloe's sacrifice saved the town and that both Chloe and Max have become more mature people. But if you run away, you get a brief cutscene of the two driving wordlessly through the wreckage of the previous level, set to a song you've already heard. At worst, lazy content reuse, and at best suggesting that Max remains stuck in adolescence and hasn't really gone anywhere or moved forward. Look, you really don't want to put this kind of core thematic point in the hands of the audience. It'd be like letting viewers vote on whether Rick should let Elsa get on the plane in Casablanca. An option that negates the whole point the work has been building to should not be an option. Max, and by extension the player, should have to go back and let Chloe die. And if there are any choices, they should be how we as Max choose to grieve for her. That is impactful while in line with our character arcs. It lets us send everyone off while still letting us respond to the text in-game. Anyway, despite all of its flaws, flaws, I do love this game. Like I said, Life is Strange is aimed at finding a sense of emotional truth, and while it stumbles from melodrama to mawkish sentimentality to awkward video gameness in its search, it manages to strike a chord often enough that it's worth all of the other junk just for those moments. There's an earnestness about them, especially with Chloe and Max's friendship, that simply isn't found often in video games. That doesn't make a particularly strong argument for Life is Strange in the greater media landscape of 2015. There are plenty of movies, books, and TV shows that do as good a job at this sort of thing, if not better. But in video games, it is still something rare, something to cherish. It's a game that dares to go small, to believe that something as mundane as a friendship between teenage girls is more interesting than time travel and apocalyptic portents. Structurally, mechanically even, it's a bit of a mess, throwing in plot cul-de-sacs and random gameplay change-ups based on whatever feels right rather than a cohesive whole. But it's a mess that finds grace in its characters and their everyday struggles wherever it can. I don't know if that makes it a good game, but it makes it a touching and memorable one.
The mask I polish in the evening, by the morning looks like shit. I know you have a heavy heart, I can feel it when we kiss. So many men stronger than me have thrown their backs out, trying to live